Hey, cool kids. Welcome back into the Cool Grandpa podcast. I'm excited that you're joining me this week because we have a returning guest, Richard Eyre, who is on to talk to us about a new course that he's putting together called How to Live. This is a great course that's especially meant for those of us that are entering or well entrenched into our second half of life. And this is a way for us to really make sure that we're maximizing our influence on our family as well as our community. So you're going to enjoy this conversation that I have with Richard. We had a blast catching back up. So without further ado, let's jump into this conversation. Hi, Richard. Welcome to the Cool Grandpa podcast. I'm excited to have you back on again to talk about grandparenting.
Thank you, Greg. It's been too long. How long's it been? A couple of years at least.
I think at least, even though we've been in contact here and there over those couple of years, it has been. We last had you on, I think we were talking about being a proactive grandfather. And
that's right.
I'll move it over. You can see I still got my tabs and everything in the book.
Good. I like to see those dog-eared pages. That's always a good sign. We should make it an annual event. Cool grandpa. I want to be a cool grandpa at least once a year.
Absolutely. It would be awesome. There's a couple of people I do have that have become kind of an annual kind of guest with some, everybody has some changes going on. Everybody has projects that they're working on that benefits grandfathers. And so this is no exception for us to talk about this.
Like when we were off the air talking a minute ago, it's a moving target being a good grandpa, and you don't have control over a lot of it because you don't know what those new grandkids are going to be like, and you don't know what one's going to turn into by the next year.
Oh, absolutely. And then the societal changes and changes in parenting styles and everything else. As soon as you have a book out, everything changes.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Books are one thing, but it's a whole different world. Back in the 90s when we had New York Times bestsellers, I mean, that was the heyday of books. And when you wrote a book, it was like an end in itself. The book was the end. That was it. That was the product. Now you write books sort of as a springboard to do podcasts and to do blogs and to do social media and so on. And you don't really plan on anyone actually reading your book. And when someone has read your book, I want to hug them. I want to say, like, yes, you're a person who still reads books. And when I see somebody with their book marked up like yours, I'm like, old school, baby.
I know some people love tablets and they love those e-readers and all that stuff. And that's great. I need to have something in my hand, and I need a highlighter and dog-eared the pages. And
absolutely. In fact, people are shocked when they see books that I really like, because I not only fold the pages over and put tabs on them. If there's a place in the middle of the page I like, I tear the page a little and fold it over so I can find that very spot. And the books just look awful. And the probably the worst thing, I shouldn't admit that, but I'll be reading a good book and Linda will want to get started on it. And so, I mean, they're all paperbacks, right? So we tear them apart, and here's the first half, honey, and I'll finish the second half. So if you looked at our bookshelf, a lot of them are intact, but they've got a couple of strips of tape around them where we put them back together. And people will say, you're an author, you should respect books. And I'm like, that is a respected book because it's been read many times.
Right.
The way they're not meant to respect a book is you don't read it.
Yeah, they're not meant to be dust collectors in my mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I wanted to have you on to talk about a new course that you have set up, and that's the How to Live course. And I wanted to start this out with, one, just introduce the course to us, but then I wanted to get into what prompted you to feel like you wanted to build another course.
Good question, Greg, because doing a course, as you well know, is not a small deal. I mean, there's a lot of work in it, but and by the way, the full name of the course, because I think it's intriguing, is How to Live the Second Half of Life. And that pretty well gathers in all grandparents. I don't know too many grandparents who say, well, I'm still in the first half of my life. If you are, you're on the very tail end of the first half,
Right.
And I think what we've found I mean, this is a big deal for us because for 30 years, our audiences were just parents. I mean, that's who invited us. They might be corporate CEOs or whatever, but the reason we were there was to talk about parenting and about marriage and about sort of the nuclear family of parents and kids. And then suddenly, a few years ago, we realized that that's not where we are anymore. We're talking about our past, and we want to talk about our present. And where we are right now is grandparenting, big time. Like the title of the book you held up indicates, we just feel like the difference between being a sort of a passive grandparent who just sort of is semi-interested in his grandkids and being a proactive grandparent is the difference between night and day. And it's the difference between really having an influence on what is going to end up being your only legacy and just sort of sitting back and letting it all happen. Or the worst thing we hear some parents saying is, well, I did my thing. I'm done with the whole thing now. I've done my family thing. Now it's up to my kids to raise my grandkids. Well, they are the stewards over your grandkids, but boy, do they need your help, And so we got into the grandparenting thing. And then, as I mentioned to you a minute ago off air, we got talking to some of the people who were coming to our lectures or reading our books and so on. And it's kind of like, it's a little like, when you say, I really want to be a better grandparent, so I'm going to start working on my grandkids. And wait a second, how about I want to be a better grandparent, so I got to start working on myself? And so we sort of changed our tone a little bit, and the message we go out with to give speeches and do webinars and so on, and that we're trying to put into this course is, how about thinking a little harder about where you are in your own life, the seasons of your life, and whether you need some new paradigms and some new parameters now that you're into the second half. And, I mean, to use sports analogies, which more and more grandmas like these too, but if you're in the fourth quarter of the game, that's a big deal. That's when it's going to be decided whether you win or lose. Or if you're in the fifth set of a tennis match, I mean, or if you're in the crescendo of an orchestra, I mean, there's endless metaphors, but always it's the end that really matters. And not many of us like to think we're at the end, but it's really powerful to think I'm closer to the end than I am to the beginning. We can handle that. We can say, I still want to live actively. I still want to do a lot of things. But if I look closely at where I am in my life and where my family is, I need some new approaches. It's not about going out and forming another company and trying to make another $1 million or trying to succeed in the world or trying to pad my resume or add to my list of accomplishments. Those things are really not that attractive anymore. What's attractive is the relationships in my life. And maybe if I'm a type A person, who a lot of our audiences are, maybe I need to be a little honest and say I've kind of screwed up those priorities in the early years. I've sacrificed a little too much in the relationship side in order to really make it in the achievement side. And so maybe part of my motivation is guilt. I actually, this is a funny thing to say, Greg, but I've actually decided that guilt can be a really good thing, not shame. Shame is a really bad thing. There are a lot of negative things that we can put on ourselves that never help us at all. But feeling a little regret or feeling, gee, I could have done that better, that's kind of a powerful thing, because it says, do I still have time? Do I still, and for a lot of grandparents, boy, do you ever have time? You can be if you set your goal to become a really good empty nest parent, a good parent to your kids who are grown up now, very different, right? Because they're not your kids anymore. They're your peers. And you've tried this vertical relationship you used to have with them is never gonna work now. And the more you turn that to where, and frankly, that's a funny thing to say, because when you're talking to parents, a lot of times what you've got to tell them is, look, your kids don't need you to be their friend. They need you to be their parent. Come on, step up and be their parent. But now your kids are parents, and now you can be that thing you thought you wanted to be earlier, but they didn't need you for. Now you can be their friend and their peer. It can be give and take. They can pick up the check when you go to dinner half the time. I mean, the whole thing starts to equalize, and you can say to yourself, I'm not the CEO in this family, but maybe I'm the consultant. Maybe I'm a guy who's been around the track a few times. And if I play my cards right and I don't come off as the boss or the manager or the guy who criticizes and knows more and why aren't you a better parent, maybe if I can be just the opposite of that, maybe if I can be, hey, let me look at your situation and have you ask me things whenever you want. Let's have the initiative coming from you. You're the parent, you're the steward. But I'd love to be supportive. I'd love to help where I can. And that begins to change you as a person into someone that really ends up becoming a super good grandparent.
Yeah, I love that analogy of really becoming a peer and working as a consultant, because I like to think of generally when we're younger parents, we're very tactical in nature, right?
Strategic.
Kids are screaming. I've got a presentation at work. I'm down here in the weeds. I think as we get older, if we're aware enough, we move into that strategic role.
Right.
And that like you said, that day-to-day, that top-down guidance becomes less, and it becomes more questions. Hey, I think that's a good idea to do this.
You're absolutely right. And that gets into the answer to your earlier question. Why do we want to do this course? Another interesting sort of perspective thing. I bet you when you were younger, I know when I was younger, when I'm in that first half of life, one of the things that really matters to you is mentors. If you have a couple of really good mentors who are either professionally or in your family or whatever, someone you admire, and you sort of pattern your life after them and they give you input and advice. And then you come to the second half of life and you're sort of the mentor for other people, but you're saying to yourself, where's my mentors now? Where do I get my motivation, my encouragement, my ideas for being a better grandfather, being a more sort of with it person who understands what's going on in my children's lives and my grandkids' lives? And I think the answer is we mentor each other. So what we're trying to do through this How to Live course is create an online group or several online groups where, my job is to throw out some ideas, but I'm not really teaching the course as much as I am saying, here's an issue, here's one idea, what are your ideas? And we get on there and we hear different people talking about it. It becomes like we now have mentors again. And there are peers who are facing some of the same things that we are. And it becomes very, very interesting. And so the way the course works is there's going to be a month on how to live physically. And I mean, I'm not going to get into all these, but you just start thinking of the possibility. What are our issues in the second half of life? What about our diet? What about our exercise? What about our sort of sense of our bodies? And is that body really the vehicle you need to be a good grandparent and be good in these other roles? Then how do I live mentally? What can I do to stay sharp? What can I do to stay up to speed? What can I do to even be on the same social media as my grandkids? What can I do to myself up here? How can I live better? Then how can I live better socially? And that's a whole different world now because, we don't have the sort of automatic patterns and relationships we did in our corporate world or whatever we used to do? How do I build that social part of me? Emotionally, how am I? How am I doing emotionally in this second half? And then finally, we think it's the climax of the course. How am I doing spiritually? Where's my heart? Where's my soul? Where are my priorities? And so it's going to be a really interesting course. And like I say, I wish I knew enough to say, just sit there and listen, and I'll tell you all the answers. I'm doing it partially because I want to hear the answers of a lot of other people who I can get ideas from.
That's one reason I do this podcast, is so I can talk to smart people and ask them questions.
Absolutely.
When is this course going to get started? When does it kick off?
Well, if you were to go to, and by the way, that we've put this in our website, so it's a little. Well, you'll put it in your show notes and everything, the link, but it's nested in our Values Parenting website, which is a big website. If anyone ends up on valuesparenting.com, they're just going to have to go to Richard and Linda Eyre, and then the top entry is How to Live. But the way it's going to work is very, I think, unique. And let me just quickly kind of tell you why we're doing it this way, and then I'll tell you what it is. I love Zoom courses. I love online lectures and all that stuff. But the problem is it's almost like going to a meeting. You got to be there at a certain time. You got to sit there for an hour. You got to be available. You got to be able to raise your hand and ask questions and so on. And for a lot of seniors, I don't even like the word seniors, by the way, Greg, because it's a funny word, isn't it? In business, you want to be the senior consultant or the senior editor or the senior vice president. But in life, you're not sure you want somebody to call you a senior. And as you know, I'm a ranked senior tennis player, and I love in tennis, they never use the word senior. It's you're in the masters division now. You're part of the masters division. And I think that's what we're all trying to be. We want to be masters of who we are. But the problem is to sit down at a regular interval and have a Zoom course and respond to it and so on. It's just a little too structured. So we love this app that's called Marco Polo. I don't even know how, a lot of people are not even familiar with it, but it's the simplest app in the world. People join a group or a class, and you can have 100 people on there or more, but the leader or whoever, in this case me, is going to put a little post on there every day or so, and it's going to be short. It's going to be 3 or 4 minutes. And then the people who are in that group listen to it and watch it anytime they want on their phone. And when they watch it, turns out to be really important. Like, they want to find a time when they're in a good place, physically and mentally. They might want to go to their special place where they feel the best, or where they're meditating, or where they're in nature or whatever. And they may want to do it late at night or early in the morning or whenever they're the most receptive. Then they're going to listen to that message, and they're going to maybe add something to it with a little, because they can video right back. And we're going to ask the comments back to be less than a minute. So you get over 30 people in half an hour and see what their take and their idea was. And then the next day, here's another one. And, you might just watch it and say, that's fine. Or you might watch it and say, that one doesn't really apply to me. Never mind. But here and there, you'd say, now, that's something I want to think about. That's something that could change me a little physically, or if we're on the mental month or the social month or whatever. And so it'll be a sort of take it when you can and respond when you want to. And even if somebody's out of, say you're on a trip or you're busy or you've got a lot going on and you haven't looked at it for a couple of weeks, that's okay. Sit down somewhere, and maybe it'll only take you an hour to catch up and say, click by the ones you're not interested in and get to the ones that you are. And I think it's going to really be fascinating because it sort of respects the members of the course as equals. Like, let's talk, but we don't all have to be in the same room or on the same Zoom at the same time. We can just listen to each other when we're ready to listen and talk when we're ready to talk. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it works out.
So, Richard, what should a person expect going through this course as a potential outcome?
Well, I'll get a little philosophical. I mean, we all know the Socrates quote, "The unexamined life is not worth living," right? This is a pretty big ask. I'm asking grandparents, grandmas, as well as grandpas to examine their life a little bit, not their grandkids' lives or their kids' life, but their own life, and decide if they're living the kind of life that they really want to live at this stage and in this place. And I think that takes some peers. That takes this sort of peer thing to do it. And I think now, if you're a grandparent, and I know some people like this who are saying, hey, last thing I need is another course. I'm doing just fine. I'm happy with where I am. I'm doing my best. I've got my own program. Great. But if you're a person who I find a lot of grandparents they want ideas, but they don't only want grandparent ideas. They want to be working on themselves and trying to become their best self. And one of the 5 facets may appeal more than another. One may say, I'm okay physically. I'm not so worried about that, but I'm a little worried about mentally. What can I do cognitively? I want to tune into that. Or I'm a little troubled socially. I don't feel like I have the friendships I used to have or whatever. So it's pretty ambitious because we're going to touch on all 5 of those facets. And we're not going to claim to have solutions for any of them. We're just going to claim, hey, there's 100 of us or 150 on here. If you pick up a couple of good ideas as we're going through that help you sort of work on yourself in a way that makes you a better grandparent and a better person, then that's what we want. That's what we'd like to have happen.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I like the idea, too, that there might be a topic a month. Like you said, maybe a person has physical traits or whatever. They're fine with that. But the thing is that if they're engaged, they're going to be able to share and mentor with other people about, okay, so how are you maintaining yourself that you can be that active and you can still go skiing on black diamonds at 85 years old or, whatever that is. And so getting back to your point about the mentorship, just because you think one area of your life is okay, that's great. That means you can help these other people out.
Very good. I'm glad you picked up on that because we all have those. I mean, if everyone in this course, in fact, maybe we should do this in some form, but of those 5 facets of life, which ones are you getting an A in and which ones are you getting a D in right now, and where would you like some help and so on? Not to say that we've got to be good at all of them. I mean, we're not going to have everyone that wants to ski black diamonds when they're 85, but we sure have people who want to be ambulatory and get around and be mobile and be able to get down on the ground with their grandkids once in a while, right? So,
right.
I mean, you could almost say, what do you have to be good at to be a good grandparent? Well, you got to have some physical ability, you got to have some mental ability, you got to have some social ability. These are the core skills of life. And who are you going to learn those from? I mean, one of the interesting things is that most self-help books are not written for people who are our age. They're written for a younger audience. Now, there's some exceptions to that. Arthur Brooks, a Harvard guy like me, but someone who's a real academic, has written a book on the second half of life, and it's really good. But it's mainly an examination of yourself. Like, for example, he says, your fluid intelligence will not be as good. You won't be able to do square roots and number manipulation and other things as fast as you did when you were younger. But don't despair because you'll have a new kind of intelligence that he calls crystallized intelligence. I'm not sure he chose the best word there, but that'll combine wisdom and experience, and you turn out to be a much more useful person in your family and in society than one of these young guys with a lot of fluid intelligence, because they don't have the experience you do, you know? So there's just all those kind of interesting things to think about and to try to put together in our heads. Well, one more thing. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't finish. The key question you asked is, how does this unfold and when does it start? We're taking it easy. We've got about 50 people signed up now. We're not marketing it. We're sort of spreading it by word of mouth and by things like this podcast. When we get up to 100 or a little over, and by the way, it could be too big, right? You don't want so many people on there that people can't get on. So we may end up starting 2 groups or so. But we're going to take our time. And in the meantime, people who are signed up will they'll get on there and they'll start getting things. But it'll be like pre-course stuff. We won't get to the physical, mental, emotional. It'll be like general things about, I just did one the other day, for example, on patterns in life. And it was fun because we're in Maui, as you know, and I was at the ocean and I was filming the patterns of the waves and so on, and saying, you know, in the first half of your life, the patterns are pretty well set for you. You go to school, you have to do certain requirements, you major in something, you get on a career path, you're following patterns that other people have done. The beauty now in the second half for many of us, especially if we're retired, but even if we're just getting toward that, we can now ask the question, what patterns do I want to have now? Do I want to keep the same ones I've had all my life? I don't think so. I want some new patterns, some new habits, some new ways to live and to enjoy life.
I love that, because I think we start to get to a point as we enter in second half that even these things that we might have read, and I wrote some of these down, right? Think and Grow Rich, 7 Habits, How to Make Friends and Influence People.
Yeah.
A lot of these things we can pick when we're younger, 1 or 2 items out of there. But I think now that we're seeing a lot more activity around, okay, how do you start to really put this into practice in second half?
Right.
That's where we have that room to do that.
No, you're exactly right. So the answer is we may start the course in 4 or 5 weeks from now if we feel like we're ready. But in the meantime, people who have signed up early will get these they're almost like trailers, right? They're almost like little previews. And so they'll probably be ready to go when we finally launch it.
Well, and I do love those, because I've got a couple of the podcasts that I listen to on some different topics where they might be daily or every other day, and they're 5-10 minutes, whatever it is. Yeah. A little bit of a thought and a little bit of how do you put it into practice, and then that's it, and that's perfect.
Yeah. The other thing you'd find, I don't know if your listeners will, I know you'll find this interesting because of the work you do, but look, I come out of a world that's very structured. I mean, if I'm speaking and it's really important, I'll have a teleprompter. If I'm writing a book, I'll have an editor, and the whole goal is to get it perfect, get it just right, get it honed down to you don't want any first drafts out there. You want completed work. This is just the opposite. This is spontaneous. This is, I'm out on a hike or I'm cross-country skiing and I have a thought and it strikes me as one that fits in with that month, and I'm pulling out my phone and I'm doing a little 2-minute post on Marco Polo. And there's no there's no makeup or hairstylist, it's just real. And I think that's what people of our vintage really like. They don't want some pre-packaged product. They want to know, where are you and what are you thinking, and they want the authentic stuff. And then they'll be empowered to say, well, I can respond to that. I don't have to go home and think about it or make notes. I can just react,
Right. And I think that's one of the things I did like listening to some of the old Zig Ziglar stuff.
Yeah.
Even though he practiced and he did things, there were moments when he's on stage where life and events just happen, or he met somebody for the first time and incorporated their story and their circumstances into
Yeah.
what he was doing.
And the best time he ever told that story was the first time he told it,
Yes.
because now he's on the 100th time and it's sort of a little stale in his own mind.
Right. It would be like listening to Johnny Carson tell the same joke every other week, right? You
Right.
know, some of the beauty of watching Carson, and we're dating ourselves a little bit, but that's all right.
No, yeah.
What's, this joke was a great success, and then this one, it was the audience didn't make a peep.
No,
And
you're right. You're right. Yeah, that's the idea. Let's be real. Some of our kids, I don't know if your kids do it. All my kids are on an app that's called Be Real. And at a certain time of the day comes, you get a beep and you have to go on and tell what you're doing right then, no matter what it is, where you are. And there's all this sort of attempt to bring authenticity and reality and candor into things, and yet we do our presentations and everything. We make them so staid and so rehearsed. So if you're tired of that, this is going to be the course for you, because this is going to be a little bit crazy. My wife worries about it. She says, I did one the other day and I thought it was really good, and I showed it to her, and she said, but look, you're wearing the wrong shirt and your hair's not combed. How do you dare put that out there? And I'm like, I think this will relax people.
right. And it's also kind of acknowledges that, hey, sometimes being a grandfather, being a grandparent, your clothes aren't just right. You're still scrambling with little kids occasionally.
That's
Things
right.
aren't perfect and refined as much as sometimes Instagram or whatever might
Well,
show.
and by the way, you hopefully are past or trying to get past, or you're trying to impress anybody anyway. You don't really care near as much as you used to about the first impression. What you care about is what's really going on inside of you.
Right. Right. And that'll be awesome to see how these cohorts, for lack of a better word, come together and gel, and how people find mentors within the group, because that is something that older men especially struggle with.
Yeah.
Is our work friends and associates, our networks get smaller as we get older. And so that searching for somebody to talk to and run ideas by is huge for us.
It's really big. And I want to say one thing, especially to your listeners, Greg, or to any group where I feel like I have a connection. When you go online and look at this course, if you're not prepared for it, you're going to be shocked by the price. Yep. Because the price tag for this is $10,000. And people are going to say, wait a second, what is that? I mean, I can't afford that, nor would I want to afford it. And I just want to reassure you, and this won't be clear until we get into the course, but two things. Number one, it's free to sign up now for this pre-period of a couple of months. And when we get to the point where we're now moving into the formal course, there are going to be no marketing guy would like me for this. No monetizer would agree with this, but it's going to basically be pay what you want, pay what you can. And there are going to be scholarships. And if someone wants to take the course and they're like, I don't have any spare money to spend on that now, that we're going to say, come on in, we want you in. But at the same time, the reason the course was originally organized is we had CEOs and others from the audiences we were speaking to were saying they want it. And those guys need to pay for it because they can afford to, and they should pay for it, because what they pay is going to cover the cost of somebody who says, I'd like to take the course, but I don't want to pay anything. So it's a very strange marketing model where we want everyone who wants to be in the course, and we want them to pay what they can afford. So I throw that out there because you're going to send people to this website and they're going to be reading along saying, oh, I like it. And then they're going to get to the cost and they're going to say, what? And they're going to turn off unless they know that they don't really have to pay that much.
Yeah. And I appreciate that too, because I think one thing that hopefully it will spur people onto, even if they can't necessarily afford the full price tag, is it'll be a moment of truth. Am I producing value that the group members want as well? Because it's not just a, hey, I want in because this is all fun and games. It's, we're looking for people to contribute. We're looking for you to show up and be a mentor. And if the price tag is something that would keep you out, if you're of value and can add to the group, we want you in.
Right, because you're not a pupil or a student, you're a participant. You're an adjunct professor, right? I mean, you're going to help me teach the course. I should be paying you.
Right. But that's awesome. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think people will see that and they'll start to appreciate the value that's coming across on the Marco Polo. Right. And it's time to commit to being in the program. That might turn some people off, or people might not say, hey, I can't do that right now.
Yeah, I think it'll be like a self-selecting process. And I think the people who, this is kind of my hope, I think the people who end up in the permanent course or in the long-term course will be one of two kinds. And you've really kind of hit it. There'll be either people who want to pay some money and get a product and they can afford it, good, more power to them. Or there'll be people who want to participate and make their contribution, not through what they pay, but through what they offer. So that's a pretty good combination, those two kinds of people.
Oh, absolutely. It is. And everybody should have a little bit of skin in the game.
Right.
Too, so that you appreciate it. It's what's the whole thing with marketing and stuff is, if you get free stuff, you don't appreciate it as much as even a little bit.
Yeah, you're like, well, if it's free, I'll take 5 of them, and there's no perceived value.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Richard, I've enjoyed this conversation with you. Is there anything about the course, anything about value-based parenting that you want to talk about that I didn't ask you?
Maybe one more thing just to close out, Greg, and maybe this will lead to an annual, my appearance in 2026 on Cool Grandpa. You know that I'm primarily a writer, and this course is going to be a chance for me to use some of my books. I have a diet book, you may know it, mainly written for seniors, and on that month, that'll become the text. And then I have a book on serendipity. It'll play a role in the one on mental things and so on. So the books will be tied in. And the other thing you should know is kind of a preview. By next year at this time, my new grandparenting book will be out, and I'd love to have your listeners be among the first to be able to get it. And it's really going to be a fun one, because it's called The Team Approach to Grandparenting. And I won't spoil what the acronym is, but it's basically about teaming up with your kids to form a 3-generation family that really benefits the grandkids. So that'll be our talk in a year from now.
I love that. I just wrote a blog about the importance of thinking in the relationship between you and the grandchild is not a one-to-one or a straight line. It's actually a triangle.
Yes, exactly.
You've got to have the parents involved in that as well.
You've got it. Wow, I should have talked to you before I wrote the book, but then you'd have accused me of plagiarizing.
No.
We're on the same wavelength on that.
Absolutely. Good ideas are to be shared around.
Absolutely. That's why I appreciate what you do, Greg. You are the cool grandpa.
Thank you. I'm going to have to take that and put it on my grandkids' cell phones later.
There you go. It's always great to talk to you, man.
It really is. And I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to be on the Cool Grandpa podcast. Thank you.
Very good. My pleasure, and good luck to all the grandpas out there and the grandmas.
Absolutely.